Hello and welcome back to Behindthepaddle podcast with me, Porcelain Victoria. I am so excited to carry on with part 2 about all the lovely chemicals in your brain. And so we're going to go straight in and we're going to talk about endorphins, the body's natural painkillers, and pleasure enhancers. So far, we've uncovered the roles of dopamine and serotonin in the in in the in in the intricate dance of dominance and submission. But what happens when we cross the threshold into physical sensation, into impact, edging, and pain? Today's neurochemical guide is the endorphin, the body's natural painkiller, euphoric agent, and key player in the transcendent states of subspace and dom space. Endorphins are what let us cry out in pleasure when we're pushed to our limits, to feel the peace within pain, and to rise breathless and glowing from the ashes of a scene. Let's dive into the body's opioid system and understand how it's one of the most powerful allies in BDSM. So, what are endorphins? Endorphins, short for endogenous morphines, are a group of peptide hormones secreted by the pulmonary gland and central nervous system in the response to stress or pain. They're part of the body's opioid system, binding the same receptors as morphine and heroin, but in a naturally regulated internal way. There are more than 20 different endorphins, but beta endorphin is the most studied in humans and highly potent. It reduces physical pain, calms the mind, and can produce feelings of euphoria, altered perception of time and space, temporary dissociation from physical comfort, emotional catharsis. Triggers for endorphin release in kink are things like physical pain, so flogging, spanking, needle play, caning, any impact basically. So you've got physical exertion, so forced positions, bondage strain, breath play, things like that. So you've got also emotional stressors. So you've got fear, humiliation, intensity, and of course, orgasm or orgasm denial, prolonged physiological tension and release. So, yeah, there's quite like a lot of things that can trigger the endorphin. Like, wow. In all these cases, the brain interprets stress and responds with a neurochemical counterbalance, endorphins. The pain to pleasure response. The pain to pleasure paradox in BDSM. Well, BDSM often plays in the space where pain becomes pleasure, but this isn't just psychological. Endorphins allow the brain to reframe pain as a pleasurable or even euphoric experience when pain is expected, consensual, contextualized as safe and desired. The brain interprets it as a manageable stressor and compensates with a blood flow of endorphins, sometimes alongside dopamine. So let's talk about impact play as a neurochemical release mechanism. So let's break down a flogging scene. You've got the thoughts, you've got the anticipation that builds dopamine. And then when you've got the first strike has been had, it activates adrenaline and tension. And then when it's repeated, the rhythmic impact begins to signal sustained stress to the nervous system. endorphins are released to counteract pain and preserve emotional integrity. This often is why people say they didn't feel the pain until later, or why they crave harder impact after warming up. I'm one of those people sometimes. The body's pain gates have shifted, and endorphins are in full flow. So, subspace and endorphin highs. What is subspace? Really, what is it? Subspace is a neurophysiological and psychological altered state, often experienced by submissives during intense BDSM play. So I say intense, but really we're all different. So if you think it's intense, even if it's something as like little as a feather going along your body, or you getting tickled, or kissing feet, or even just looking at something, then yeah, it can be intense for that person. So everybody has different intense subspaces and how to get into those, and it is really, I would say, about communication and knowing who you're playing with. And yeah, let's carry on. So it's a combination of high endorphins, decreased prefrontal cortex activity, so reduced exclusive function, dissociation from pain, heightened emotional suggestibility, time distortion, and in simpler terms, subspace can feel like floating, dreaming, blissful surrender, euphoric numbness, total presence, or total absence. So again, subspace is different for everybody. It's not all just the same. It is one thing which I always say about in BDSM, where it's like everybody's different. Everybody is so different, and if you do want to play with somebody, you need to understand each other to an extent. So, the endorphin engine behind subspace. When endorphins flood the brain during a prolonged or intense scene, they can create a state similar to opiate intoxication, but completely self generated, and typically without the disorientation of synthetic drugs. The submissive may feel weightless or disconnected from their body, deeply emotional, open, or suggestible, like they're experiencing blank mind, per se, or stillness, detached from pain but aware of control dynamics. The chemical state reinforces submission, making the dominant's voice or touch seem amplified in emotional significance. I mean, I feel like that's just, that sounds good. When you're in a scene and you hear your dominant's voice or whoever else you're playing with, it can feel so bliss. It really can. So, what are the risks and responsibility of subspace? Because subspace involves reduced cognition and pain sensitivity, it's crucial for the dominant to monitor physiological signs like breathing, colour of their skin. If you're doing rope play, make sure you're not cutting the oxygen off and like the blood and all that stuff. If it goes blue or purple, any body parts, you need to like look and like, nope, you need to have safety shears. These, if anybody's watching, you need to have these rope safety shears to absolutely have on hand in case of any emergencies. They're really cheap and easy. You can get them. There is no excuse for doing a scene and not having some safety shears. No excuse. They can literally be like £1.50. And of course I have mine in pink. And then also think about how coherent they are. So if they're making noise, if they're not making noise, again, especially if you haven't played with somebody for that long, you need to be very in tune with how they are. Because I've been doing it for so long. I've been in the community for more than 8 years, and I've been in the lifestyle for more than 8 years. I've been professionally doing this for 8 years, and it's one thing that you pick up when you play with. For me, when you play with anybody, you make sure you notice their breathing, you notice the color, you notice if they're speaking or not. You notice the little things. Like if say you're pegging somebody and they make a noise and it's not a pleasurable noise, question that. Absolutely question it. You can go into detail. There is nothing stopping you from saying things like, oh, does it hurt when I push it in? Does it hurt around the ring of your asshole? Does it hurt inside your asshole? Like things like that. Like that was the easiest example I could think of. Because there has been times where submissives do want to also carry on because they're enjoying the time, but it is also painful for them. And it's like, we're gonna talk. Like, do you want to carry this on, or do you want to stop? Do you want to change positions? Like, there's a lot of things you can do to like alter. And then afterwards, I would suggest talking about the scene, seeing if there's anything you want to change, if there's anything you would add, if there's any concerns, and of course, aftercare. Very, very important to do aftercare. We will also be doing an episode on aftercare at some point, but I would suggest very, very much aftercare. Include that. And if you listen to part 1, you should understand that aftercare can be very, very, very vital to all the lovely chemicals and such. So yeah, dominance, always look out for your submissive. Always. So submissives may be unable to give a safe word or communicate well in deep subspace. This is where trust, pre-negotiation, so no surprises in the scenes or anything like that. Do what you guys discussed. Don't throw in, even if it's small, don't throw it in, because that can disrupt so much of the subspace and the personal well-being of that submissive as well. So yeah, pre-negotiation and intuition becomes life-saving skills. It really, really does. Especially if you're doing anything with edge play. If you're doing any electrics, or if like you've lost a sounding device in the penis, in the well actually vagina owners can actually use sounding devices as well, to be fair. I just don't really do it that often. Yeah, they're little urethra rods. I know, I'm sorry. So, dominance and endorphin rushes. Dominants also experience endorphin release, especially during high energy impact play. To be fair, I would say being the dominant, everything is bloody high energy. Like, you have to think on your feet, and you have to just think a lot, all the time. And again, you're looking out for the submissive as well, so it's not just yourself you have to think about. And with high energy scenes as well, just like rope, knife play, needle play, I know there's so many plays. And cathartic emotional arcs as well, orchestration of submissive surrender. This somatic intensity can lead to what some call dom space, a state of heightened focus and emotional power, satisfaction, and presence. For many dominants, particularly those new to their role, the endorphin rush helps counter self doubt, reinforce authority, anchor emotional presence, and build trust in their ability to deliver a meaningful scene. This pleasure they feel isn't sadistic, it's neurochemically validating for their role and skill. So, post-scene endorphin effects and the drop. The aftermath of when endorphin strikes. Endorphins, like any neurochemical, follow a peak and decline curve. After a scene, both dominants and submissives may experience physical exhaustion, emotional tenderness, temporary hypersensitivity, low mood, or drop if endorphins fall too fast. And I can absolutely understand this. Like the amount of times after a session, especially a long one, or a scene, I'm just like, I would like my bed, please. Like usually my aftercare for myself would be getting into my PJs in my lovely hoodie and having a hot chocolate and watching a movie. And I'll just be cuddling up with myself and my dogs on the sofa in a lovely blanket. That is my little wee aftercare. That is what I've made myself do to understand that it does make it better. It makes it so much better. Why is the aftercare essential? So, to ease the descent from peak endorphin states, you can use soothing touch, warmth, and grounding activities, reassure and reorient, especially for subs just emerging from subspace, hydrate, feed, and provide gentle company. You can definitely, I would say, avoid deep discussions or critiques during the crash period because, like, your brain, like, you want it to freaking slow down right now. You want to take like a slow pace, I would say, because it is just a come down from it. And it's like nobody wants to talk very in depth about certain things. Like sometimes you don't even want to think. You just want to like chill. So these practices do help buffer the come down and support the body's natural return to baseline. So we're going to talk about building a endorphin smart scene, warm up and intensity management. A scene that respects the endorphin threshold allows the body to ease into its response. Use light touch or light impact to begin. Gradually increase rhythm, weight, or pain. Avoid going from 0 to intense without build up. If, for example, you're doing caning and you just go for it, we call that cold caning. And unless you have both had a discussion about what cold caning is and how it does impact the bodies and how with the chemicals and such, I wouldn't really advise it. I would not advise it if you haven't spoken or talked in detail about what you're going to do. It is very, very important. So, longer scenes with rhythmic pattern, such as flogging or bondage, produce more sustained endorphin release than short, chaotic ones. It's why ritualized, methodical play often creates stronger emotional impact. It allows chemistry to catch up. So, whenever somebody comes to me for a paid session, I do say to them, the longer the better. Not only does it help us get to know each other, it also helps the chemicals in our brains to actually, one, get into subspace, dom space, and then calm down. Because one thing I do not like about my job is that sometimes with clients, they expect from when the hour starts to when the hour ends, it's full on domination or it's full on services. There's no like calm down. There's no breakdown until after the paid service is over, which isn't how a lot of sex workers work. We are paid for the time that you have booked, not any time afterwards. So that's the one thing which I dislike in my job, where there needs to be enough time for all of this to happen. And yeah, as I've said, I dislike it when clients do think that they can instantly have the dominant and submissive at the start, which is fine. But once my time paid for is over, then they want to like chill and talk. And it's like, that is not what happens or anything like that. So use endorphins intentionally. So for catharsis, emotional release in mind, right? A submissive who's been dealing with high stress asks their dominant for a scene focused on emotional release. Together, they plan a cathartic spanking scene in a safe private space. The dominant uses firm but nurturing impact, paired with grounding words like "you're safe" and "let it go." The submissive is the submissive is encouraged to cry, scream, or release whatever emotions come up, knowing they are held and cared for throughout. Aftercare also can include like cuddles, water, soft affirmations, helping the submissive feel cleansed and emotionally lighter. It's so beautiful. I love it. So the other ones, one is for surrender, build a deep subspace, then nurture. So it's pretty much how it is, how it sounds. During a carefully choreographed rope suspension scene, let's give this example. The dominant maintains eye contact and a steady rhythm. We're using soft verbal cues and breath control as a guide, and breath control to guide the submissive into a deep subspace. The submissive begins to drift, calm, pliable, completely surrendered. Once they're in this altered state, the dominant gently lowers them, wraps them in a blanket, and cradles them in silence. Aftercare, again, you gotta feed them, you gotta water them. Skin contact, quiet presence, reinforcing that safety and connection as the submissive slowly returns to themselves. And then the last one is for intensity. Use a buffer, not as a shield. So, for example, a dominant plans a caning scene with their submissive, who loves intensity, but sometimes disconnects emotionally when overwhelmed. Instead of using the pain as a wall to hide behind, they agree to use a pre-arranged signal like holding hands briefly between strikes to stay emotionally tethered. The physical intensity becomes a buffer that channels emotion, not a shield that blocks it. This allows the submissive to fully feel, process, and connect through the scene rather than escape from vulnerability. Don't chase the high recklessly. Use it wisely and like a skill. It really is. So, endorphins are the body's secret Opiates. Endorphins are the body's secret opiates. Whispers of safety in pain, flashes of joy in the dark. They're not just reactions, but invitations to go deeper, to feel more, to trust your body's wisdom. In the alchemy of BDSM, endorphins transform pain into poetry. Such a beautiful thought of like how it transforms. Oh, so pretty. But even beauty needs a balance. Respect the chemicals. You have to honor the drop. You have to understand the drop. And you have to be there for each other. So now we're going to talk about cortisol, stress and recovery in BDSM. We've explored the chemicals of pleasure, connection, surrender, but now we're going to step into the realm of survival. We're going to talk about cortisol, the stress hormone, the fucking stress hormone. What a cunt that is. Often misunderstood as the villain, cortisol is actually one of the body's most essential regulators. It prepares us for action, keeps us alert, and protects us in moments of perceived threat. But what happens when BDSM, even when consensual, triggers a stress response? What if fear, humiliation, or intensity causes a surge in cortisol? Well, we're going to dive in. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about how kink can activate but also heal the body's stress system. So, what is cortisol and what does it do? Cortisol's origin and function is produced in the adrenaline glands and released into the bloodstream in response to stress, particularly through activation of, I'm going to attempt to say this, hypothalamic pulmonary adrenal HPA axis. Its role is to mobilize energy in response to a perceived threat, to increase alertness and focus, and to regulate blood pressure and inflammation, and of course, prepare the body to either fight, flee, or especially relevant in kink, to freeze. So, BDSM as a controlled stressor, even in a safe, consensual play, the brain may interpret certain activities as threats. And I could mention every single little kink, every single little toy. So it's not as simple as going, oh, it could happen in impact play or needles or CBT. It can happen with anything. It really can. The body can just be like, what? Well, the brain. And with psychological intensity, with also like words, with CNC, consensual non-consent, humiliation, interrogation scenes, when like there's so many things. You can't put a finger on, oh, this might trigger me. This might not trigger me. You never know. If you certainly know you don't like to be slapped, that's absolutely fine. That's a limit. But if you're doing a scene, say impact, and you get whipped, and that might trigger you. You never know. Especially if you've never done this before. And I remember with one submissive, I put a gas mask. This has happened more than once because it's quite common, I would say, just learning about yourself. Where, for instance, I put a gas mask on a sub and he completely freaked out. He did not like it and everything like that. And then he revealed to me that he was in the army, and I was like, oh, fair. That makes sense. And there's been times where like I've had a sub go in a vac bed and he thought you'd be absolutely fine and he loves latex, but as soon as he got in he panicked the fuck like so much because the latex was covering his face and he was so enclosed, and I can't think of the word right now, where people don't like enclosed spaces. I'm sure it'll come to me later on. But yeah, there's many different things. Absolutely. So that could also include like bondage, sensory deprivation, restraints, and of course fear-inducing elements like breath play, fear play, knife play, anything. Anything could be scary to you. And you might not realize it until you're doing it, which is again so important when you have to like, communicate and things. But we're gonna go through that a little bit. So the stresses may temporarily spike cortisol. This isn't a bad thing. It's the body going to do its job. But what makes BDSM unique is that it allows us to play with stress, using it to enhance sensation, deepen catharsis, and then return to emotional equilibrium if supported properly. So, cortisol in the submissive's experience, stress activation through vulnerability. Submissives are often the recipients of physical and emotional intensity. This can result in the heart rate going up, shallow breathing, muscle tension, heightened emotional reactivity. Oh my god, this was one of the sweetest fucking sessions I've ever had. And it didn't even finish. Well, it did, but like not the way we planned. I was pegging a guy, and there were so many emotions clearly in his head. Like he was loving it, but then one minute he was loving it, the next he started crying, and I was like, "Whoa, what?" Like, obviously hugged him, cuddled him, gave him what he needed, um, and we talked, and he was like, "Yeah, I've had a lot going on recently," and I believe like his friend might have passed away and such. It was many years ago, but oh my god, like all the emotion just caught up to him while I was pegging him, and he was one of the. If you're listening, you were one of the sweetest clients I have ever met. Sadly, he moved away, but I will never forget him. He was amazing, absolutely amazing. The amount of trust we had with each other and the bond that we had, I wish every sub was like that because he was so fucking sweet. Really was. These are the signs that cortisol is active. The submissive may not be consciously afraid, but the body interprets surrender as risk. Reframing stress as empowerment. So now we're going to talk about reframing stress as empowerment. What's powerful about BDSM is that the submissives choose to face this stress. The very act of choosing to submit, knowing the risks, can transform cortisol from a signal of danger to a tool of growth. In this way, scenes become exposure therapy for fear. Intensity becomes a gateway to catharsis. Catharsis. Fear becomes erotic, not paralyzing. And this can, like, you don't have to, like, think, oh, why is my body doing this? This is so wrong. Why isn't it working? The whole therapy and things like that. Like, it's not guaranteed to, like, work. You might actually just freeze up. You might just cry. You might just, it might ruin the scene for you and the dominant. Ruin sounds like such a harsh word, but I think I hope you understand what I mean. Like, it's not your fault or anything like that, but no, not but. Ew, that's gross. Yeah, you get what I mean. Like, the scene will not be the same. There we go, that works. And yeah, don't think that it's all horrible, it's been ruined. Like, shush, get cuddles, like, you're fine. You might freeze at the first time doing it, but the more you gradually do it, you might get better and better. Your body, your brain might get better and better at understanding that it's okay. It's absolutely okay. So, yeah. Trying to explain that in such a nice way. So, cortisol drop and recovery. After a scene, if cortisol remains elevated, the submissive may experience emotional crash, hypervigilance or anxiety, fatigue or crying, temporary disorientation. So, again, it is very, very key to be in tune with oneself and have the dominant be in tune as well. So this is subdrop and it is directly linked to cortisol depletion. Proper aftercare, rich in oxytocin and serotonin, brings the system back into balance. So again, the aftercare is very, very important here. So cortisol and the dominance role, emotional responsibility and internal stress. So much stress. Dominants may also experience cortisol spikes due to performance pressure, emotional attunement to their partner's reactions, fear of causing real harm or missing cues, and managing complex scenes with high stakes. Being a dominant is not easy. It is not. There is so much you have to think about and control and make sure you are trained to some capacity. Like, even when you're caning somebody, you might accidentally miss or mess up, and that feels horrible. I absolutely feel like I've ruined the whole scene when that happens, but you have to try and not think like that. Yeah. Yeah. If you have doubt in yourself, that could lead to not so great effects in the scene. You need to try and get your confidence up, and you need to try and not be so self-conscious, because then that could be disastrous, really. So these forms of physiological stress can subtly activate the HPA axis. The dominant might not even realize they're stressed, but cortisol may be running high in the background, especially during edge play or fear inducing scenes. So, managing stress while in control. For dominance, cortisol regulation can be improved through rituals, say like saying like 3 times like you're an amazing dom, you can do this, like all that stuff. And grounding breath techniques before the scene. I mean, even if you want to do it in the scene, I don't really see a problem with that, because you are trying to ground yourself. You're trying to like um get yourself back together essentially. And of course, communication and pre-scene emotional calibration if possible. So also focused attention on the submissive cues reduces uncertainty and gets yourself back into control. And when you see whoever you're playing with in having a good time, then that can help so much with the fear of, am I actually doing this right? And then you hear them moan, and it's like, yeah. And yeah, that is a major cortisol trigger. Dominants also benefit from aftercare as well. We did hit on this in part one, but it, of course, is always great to talk about it in part two as well. Not just to reinsure the submissive, but to compress their own nervous systems as well. Like, we do need to have that dom drop, but slowly, just as the submissives as well. So, navigating the edge when cortisol enhances play. Scenes that flirt with danger, consensual non consent, knife play, breath play, fear play, often create intentional cortisol spikes. This can enhance focus and alerts, the perception of time slowing down, emotional catharsis afterwards, and the intensity of trust bonds when the quote danger ends. This kind of controlled stress exposure can be physiologically beneficial when it's clearly negotiated. Participants have the emotional tools to recover, so again, you need to be really in tune with yourself and with your body. And the dominant, it helps if they are vigilant and skilled. But do not, just because you don't have the experience, don't let that put you off. Like, learn more, and like it's like a job in a way, where like you can do all the training for it, but because you don't have any in-person experience, you most of the time get turned away. And you just have to really, really keep at it. And it is a skill, absolutely. BDSM in general. So, cortisol plus endorphins plus catharsis. Cortisol and endorphins often operate in tandem. The spike of stress followed by release creates emotional purging, tears or laughter, euphoric exhaustion, and a sense of having survived something together, basically. It's not just about situation, it's about transformation. Absolutely. So, recovery and long term regulation. How to help the body return to baseline. After a cortisol heavy scene, the nervous system needs time to rest. You can support this by providing emotional containment and space to feel, gentle touch, water, food, or grounding sensitivity input, avoiding sudden transitions like and also lights, noises. Like sometimes you can keep them low and noises down quite a bit. And of course, affirming words to close the scene, like "you're safe now, it's over, I've got you," all that cute shit. So, long-term resilience through BDSM. Repeated consensual exposure to stress in BDSM may build psychological resilience. The submissive learns to endure, the dominant learns to regulate. The body learns the arc, stress, peak, recovery. When scenes are scaffolded with care, the BDSM becomes a form of nervous system training. Cortisol is the fire we dance around in BDSM. It is the edge, the gasp, the moment the mind races and the body asks, "Am I safe?" In BDSM, we answer the question with presence, care, and trust. We take the body to its limits, but then we bring it home. And in doing so, we don't just play with stress, we learn to master it. So, the last thing we're going to talk about is we're going to bring it all together. What does it mean to play with the entire chemistry of the brain? How do you synthesize dopamine, serotonin, endorphins, oxytocin, and cortisol into scenes that are not just safe, but transcendent? So that's what we're going to talk about next. I'm so excited. And then we're going to wrap up because this is going to be like probably maybe just under an hour. So you've made it to the last bit. Thank you so much for listening to me for both of these episodes. I know they have been long episodes and I really, really appreciate it. So BDSM as neurochemical orchestration. BDSM is not just play, it's neurological engineering. Every scene is a structured experience designed to shape a person's neurochemical state. A well-crafted scene often follows a neurochemical arc: anticipation, dopamine. The scene begins with suspense, the submissive's body hums with potential. The dominant plans, prepares, and teases. Desires grow. Ooh. Intensity, endorphins, cortisol. Impact play, impact, power, emotional edge. Pain becomes pleasure. Fear becomes erotic. Stress activates and the body meets it with euphoria. Surrender and control. Serotonin, oxytocin. Emotions stabilize. The scene flows. Eye contact and ritual deepen connection. Both partners are inside the moment. Climax or catharsis. Endorphins and dopamine. The high hits, a breakthrough, an orgasm, or emotional release erupts. Bodies tremble, boundaries dissolve. Recovery, oxytocin, serotonin. The touch softens, words come gently. Blankets, kisses, breathe. The world narrows to safety. The nervous system rewires. This process mirrors others' peak experiences: dance, performance, ritual, even psychedelic journeys. BDSM is intentional chemical transformation. and knowing that allows us to craft it with respect. The ethics of neurochemistry. Consent is not just verbal, it's neurological. Understanding neurochemistry reveals that consent is not a one time event. It's a state that shifts with chemical tides. A person may enter a scene feeling confident, but under high endorphin or cortisol, may lose their ability to articulate. Subspace alters perception. Dom space may narrow empathy. That's why safe words must be respected and rehearsed. Nonverbal communication is essential. You need to figure that out. You need to be able to talk to each other, even when not using physical words. Negotiation should anticipate emotional shifts, absolutely. Care is a chemical responsibility. When you induce stress, you must offer grounding. When you generate attachment, you must nurture it. BDSM ethics extend into the neurochemical aftermath. So, did you provide a soft landing? Did you check in days later after dopamine dropped? Did you consider your partner's mental health context? This is where kink becomes not just erotic but spiritually mature. There is so much you need to do with checking up on the person, making sure, even a week after time, you could come back to them and be like, "Are you good? Is there anything we need to discuss? Just wanted to know if you're taking care of yourself," all that stuff. So, the gift of neurochemical awareness, designing better scenes, knowing how these chemicals work, allows partners to build anticipation with purpose, dopamine, modulate intensity mindfully, endorphins and cortisol, prioritize emotional safety, serotonin, foster lasting bonds, oxytocin. It also helps when scenes don't go as planned. A drop, a misread clue, a moment of misalignment. Neurochemistry offers a language for understanding and repair. Sometimes a scene invokes deep tears, or a submissive falls into a 3-day blissful fog, or a dominant feels raw and powerful in a way that changes them. This is not just a mood. These are neurochemical rites of passage, and they deserve reverence. They deserve acknowledgement. It's a must. It really is in the BDSM scene. BDSM is often called edge play, but the edge isn't just physical, it's emotional, chemical, spiritual. When you play with power, you play with brains, hearts, bodies, and blood. When you hold someone down, you hold their trust. When you whisper in their ear, you whisper to their neurochemistry. This episode wasn't just about neurotransmitters, it was about the sacred science of connection. And connection itself, where it's very, very important to have the talks and be human, basically. If we understand what's happening inside us, we can love better, play deeper, and build safer, more transformative dynamics. Whether you're a seasoned dominant, a curious submissive, or a switch in the process of discovery, may this knowledge empower your kink, strengthen your compassion, and remind you BDSM is not play, it is alchemy. Thank you so much for joining this episode. I am Porcelain Victoria, and this has been Behind the Paddle podcast. This episode is Neurochemistry of BDSM, Dopamine, Serotonin, and the Brain on Kink, Part 2. Thank you so much for listening. You can leave us a review on Spotify, Apple, everything. It's great. Please do, please do. If you want to hear any topics, no matter what they are, it doesn't just have to be kink. We talk about all sorts here. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. And you can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, YouTube. You can watch me on YouTube because I put my video on there as well, so you can actually see what I look like. We have Instagram, Twitter. We use Instagram quite a lot. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. Bye.